has got.
It's one of my favourite films.
That has got everything in that film. It made me cry my arse off.
Welcome to the Graphters Podcast.
That's probably the first time we've ever got it even remotely close.
That was good. Of course, we're not even a bottle down yet.
No, and I'm half a bottle down, but then that's probably because I'm drinking a nice little wee bottle of Tooheys.
I noticed that's the small bottle. I've got the pint bottle today.
Have you?
Yes, it's the large one.
Asahi. And you've got a jam jar.
Got a dry cider.
Oh.
Dry cider. Beautiful. Is it Aspel's?
Kind of weather.
Is it Aspel's?
It's not Aspel's. I can't remember the name. It's a little indie cider maker. I ordered it off the internet. I wish I had the bottle, but it's the bottom half. It's a little bit... I opened
cloudy.
It yesterday, so it's gone a bit flatter today.
That's probably easy to drink.
Yeah,
it's nice.
I am partial to Old Rosie, especially when it's on tap.
I've met her. I always thought she was quite nice.
After 2 glasses, you don't care.
After 2 Old Roses, I can do anything.
How are you doing, Gary? It's nice
I'm very
to see
well.
you.
I'm very well, John. How are you, mate?
I'm good.
Busy still?
Very busy. Obviously, this is the busiest time of year. We've gone through all our Q tags.
Yeah.
We're preparing now for the next September starts, so it's all very, very full on, good to go. Mm-hmm. And I'm really sad because I won't be there. I'm leaving.
I know. Let's not talk about that right now, though.
No.
Let's leave that. Let's leave that one hanging.
And on that bombshell.
On that bombshell, we will move on. It's been really hectic for me as well. It's been busy for myself and also with anyone else who's working at Space. We've got a lot of projects on. I've been working on several. Well, I've now got it down to one project, which is quite nice. And again, as always, can't tell you what it is, can't talk about it, but it's very exciting, actually. It is very exciting when you actually work out what they're talking about. You go, oh, that's clever. That's clever. It's going to revolutionise something. Let's just say that.
Have you had a chance to watch Love Space? Is it Love Death Robots on Netflix?
Do you know what? I haven't watched the first series yet.
Oh, you got to watch that.
What I have. I'll be honest with you. What I have just finished this very day. I got around and I watched the last episode of Series 2 of The Boys on Amazon Prime, and I've got to tell you, it has got the best special effects on a TV show I think I've ever seen. I mean, because they're very visual. It's not like the stuff that's hidden away where it's like, we replaced this or we put that in or we got rid of this. It's like in-your-face visual effects. Heads exploding, all sorts.
I'm going to throw another one in, though. The Man in the High Castle.
Oh, yeah.
The visual effects in that...
Blender.
Blender. But I didn't know they were.
What was that? Was that 1 minute in? Did I mention the B word 1 minute in?
I didn't realize they were Blender until we did a break. There was a breakdown recently. I was watching and I was like, oh, whoa! I know that interface.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was
very, very good. Very, very good.
Yeah, it is actually very impressive stuff. I think it's like anything. I know we talk about all sorts of bits and bobs, but it is interesting, isn't it? I find that the quality of visual effects in TV have come so far compared to how they were, because obviously the price of everything came down dramatically. So it wasn't just like movie money that had the money for visual effects. The price of visual effects came down, and as such, the stuff that you get in TV and the stuff you get in film, it's very difficult to see the line between.
Would you say that is down to the pipelines and workflows being so tight now? In how you create a visual effects sequence?
I think more than likely it is. And actually, we're very, very fortunate today because we have with us, and he's now going, that's a good link point, Gary. We have with us a gentleman who actually has been involved very much so with the visual effects on films and the visual effects in TV, having worked on such films as Dread. And more recently, on the most recently, I think that he was doing, which is I could talk about, is The Crown. The most recent series of The Crown, probably.
Wow.
And also, he's been very heavily involved in the pipeline side. And that is a man who has the most beautiful, stunning first name. His name, very much like my own, is Gary Kelly. Gary, hello.
Thanks for having me. Hello.
Always a pleasure, never a chore.
You guys got off to a start there, making me sit on the sidelines while you start talking about visual effects in television. I just wanted to burst in and interrupt you.
But what and say? No, quick! It's not me.
And that's why we record 3 different streams.
Oh, the editing! Oh, the editing!
Oh, the editing is so good.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for agreeing to come on, actually, Gary.
Just on the editing, Gary.
Yeah.
How did I do? First edit last time. I know it took 11 days.
It took me about an hour to unpick all the audio because until I knew that John had a slight hearing issue, but I did not know.
So I only have a right ear. So
yeah.
So everything went to the right.
So there was no balancing. There was no normalisation.
It sounded great to me.
Yeah.
I thought you'd done it deliberately, where you'd have sort of Gary on the left and John on the right in your ear, but.
We do.
That's what I tend to do because it's.
I just didn't have a prayer when I started setting up the scenes, and I was turning it on and I was thinking I've lost the audio because it's in my left ear. It just shows how good these AKGs are. Yeah,
I've got to say, good set of headphones. You can't go wrong with. I'm really pleased with the headphones that I bought.
We haven't quite got to sponsors yet, but AKG, we're always ready for an upgrade.
Other headphones are available.
Unless they're sponsoring us.
Oh, shush. 7 podcasts. They're gonna wait till there's like at least 1,005 billion people following us.
No, we're niche. We're niche.
Niche. Yeah. No. Does that mean no one listens to us? That's the one. Yes, that's it. Actually, I do know one person who listens to it religiously, and his name's David Sturzaker. And Gary and I both know him because we work with him. So
he's now got a name call. Well done. Episode 7, you got a name drop.
He deserves it.
Have
He's
you
lovely.
Invited Dave to join you yet on the podcast?
Yes. I invite him on a bi-weekly basis, and every single time he says,
"I'm busy."
No, I don't want to do it.
I think
I'm
you
a bit nervous.
have a lot of really
I'm
good
nervous. I'll make a
perspective.
fool of myself. And I said, I do that every week, and sometimes even on a podcast. You know, it's I think he'd be great, but he doesn't particularly want to do it, and I'm not about to push him, so that's fine. I'll just keep on asking every now and again.
So, Gary, I'm going to jump in. This is to Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
We may have to switch to more formal words.
Just call me Noden. Just call me Noden from this point on for this podcast.
So, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, yeah. My name's Gary. I'm currently a visual effects supervisor up here in Manchester. But I've been in the industry for maybe around 12 years, I think now. I started off up here in the north, and then spent probably the last sort of 8 years down in London, primarily with a little trip out to Chicago for a year. But pretty recently, the last sort of 4 or 5 years, based back up here, but still down south a lot. That's it. So I've mainly worked in television drama and commercials, with it interspersed with a few films for little bits here and there. So I've sort of covered a reasonable range of all the sort of genres, I guess, you get in our industry.
Fantastic.
Found myself not getting too pigeonholed, I think.
That's been good.
That is so good. Some people do, you find yourself dropping into those. Once you start to get good at something, that's all you get known for doing, and
it's absolutely the case. I mean, I don't see that changing. I remember first, going down to London and kind of seeing that firsthand. I think when I was up north, everything's a little bit more broad, but London was the first time I really saw how compartmentalised that is. With you have film guys, and then you have commercials guys, and that was all alien to me. And I think it's really still the same. I think and companies and recruiters still tend to really bias towards, and maybe film companies will look down their nose at commercials guys.
I mean, even in single companies like MPC, you've got those divides.
Oh yeah,
you can't cross lines.
Yeah, I mean, you can work in the film department of MPC and literally walk around the corridors and go into commercials, and it's a completely separate environment with nobody knowing each other. It's very strange.
So the people literally do not cross over from one to the other.
It's very rare. I mean, obviously, of course, there is some crossover, but you tend to have commercials people. I mean, that probably is as much, our industry is obviously very based on who you know and connections and things like that. So if you found your early years probably in commercials, your network of people is likely just to be commercials producers and commercial companies, and so that's probably what you go for. The same with film. If you work in film, your friends will go work at other film companies and you'll stay in touch with that. So it's probably not just necessarily that companies keep them separately. It maybe is that you just find your own little networks,
This is fantastic. Any students out there listening to this, and I hope you are, and we know that there are some students out there, your networks start just in your education's formative years. So while you're at university, make sure, even though you might not like the person that you're working with, keep in touch, keep in contact, make that connection. You never know when one day you might need a job off them.
Oh, I mean, LinkedIn has been... I mean, it started, I think, when I was getting going sort of Twitter. When I first went to London is how I found my first jobs, but very quickly sort of LinkedIn swept in, and that just became the sort of de facto. So yeah, I mean, meet people and connect with them and just see where they are and follow those feeds. That's how you keep in touch with people,
We were
Very quickly.
Sorry, Gary. We were talking about this, weren't we, yesterday? About me being the social butterfly and how I keep my network connections open and lots of conversations. And I suppose Gary is the proverbial grafter of head down and focused on what he's doing.
Well, yeah, I get a little bit obsessed with what I'm doing, but then I think that's the nature of the job, I think, unfortunately.
I get distracted so easily. That's why I'm always contacting people.
Oh, well, it doesn't stop me from being a noisy git. I mean, I'm still in an office space. I'm still a little bit of a... I try... My raison for being, my reason for being, my raison d'etre when I'm working in any place, whether I was freelancing or whether I wasn't, was to try and make sure I kind of have a bright, smiley face and not have a downcast attitude, because I think it's important to just try and keep yourself happy and try and keep other people around you sort of like slightly more light-hearted, because it's very easy, and I know I do it myself sometimes. You put your head down and you kind of you just go and you're in a zone and you're stuck, and you just have to kind of break yourself out of it every now and again. So but that's just me.
So just on the education front then, Gary.
Sorry.
See, I knew this would be. Noden, shut up.
Thank you. Okay. I will.
So Gary, tell us a bit about your education. Where did you study?
I studied animation in Carlisle back when it was the Art Institute there. I think it's now Northumbria maybe or something like that. I can't quite remember what it's become now. But there was it was animation and multimedia. I think multimedia design and digital animation, I think was the course. Which I didn't necessarily go into it wanting to do animation. I think that during art GCSE I found myself, I had a PC and submitted my first projects with work done in Photoshop. I think that was like a formative...
Coral paint.
Yeah, that was like a formative moment for me. I remember standing in the middle of the art class in high school defending my right to submit work done on a computer, and I think at the time I remember the young tutor sort of sparking that debate in a good way. She was a great tutor, and I think she sort of wanted to raise the debate of, is it art if it's done on a computer, because this was like the mid-late 90s where that wasn't really a thing, and I think so at that point I pushed on through that and then studied.
I had the exact same debate in 88, 89, but my art tutor was much older and said, you're never going to make any money in art anyway. And that was the driving factor that pushed me into this industry. Yeah. It drove me. Almost insane. And
I think that was it. I mean, that sticks out maybe just because that's what I've carried on doing, but I always sort of knew I wanted to go into some sort of computer art related thing. And that course sort of stuck out nicely for me, but very quickly found myself swamped by extremely talented 3D artists whose like level of modelling within the first few weeks was outrageous.
So I've got a question for you. We've just had this debate at college. They come in, they have a talent, a clear talent. Did you see the talent turn off? As in, they got comfortable with what they were doing?
That is a great question. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely think of a few people that almost like they never really, they didn't really improve.
They never kicked on. Yeah.
But their level was so high already that it sort of didn't matter that they didn't improve. It was that everybody else caught them up. I had and still do a big interest in sort of skating and filming and photography, and the college at the time, and I hope a lot of universities still have this, kind of an open policy for all of their departments. So if you wanted to go hang out in the woodwork department, you just had to do a half day introduction, and you could go there anytime you like and use the woodwork department or the camera department or the music studios or the photography studios. And myself and a couple of friends, we very quickly realised you could just go to the camera department and just rent film level at the time camera and broadcast equipment, green screen studios, and that was it for us. It was a very social thing. We could take a big Sony broadcast camera and take it out with us for the day whilst we were going out. We'd travel down to Keswick, or we'd go skating, on the East Coast, like out in Redcar, or we go up to Edinburgh. And it's like we can take all these cameras with us and sort of play around, and then we were doing little edits and started adding text, and we learned After Effects, and that was really it. So we had our sort of course going on, like normal education things of like learning animation and those sorts of things. I think at the time we were using Macromedia Director to do sort of build interfaces and things like that, but there was a little bunch of us sort of developing our own little education that we weren't being taught any of this stuff. We just sort of taught ourselves, and I just kept doing that basically. So
this is so interesting, because more and more we now see what's called the value for your education. So students are coming in and saying, well, what am I being taught? And they almost want to be taught how to do a job in the industry. And what you've just described is actually the magical potion that is how you get a job in the industry. You be a bloody inquisitive so-and-so that goes out and fannies around with cameras and light and exposure levels and sound and things like that, that then somewhere in there you'll find something that then makes you a marketable asset.
It really is. And
to a company somewhere.
I've been interviewing a lot of graduates recently, and even just junior artists, for roles, and the people that stick out are those people. You can just get a sense from chatting to them that's what they're into. It's like most graduates, their reels aren't strong in that sense, obviously, in comparison to the work we're going to make them do, or the work we do already. And I think I try to explain that to a lot of graduates, or even lecturers and people who are forwarding their work, that the reels are weak in that sense, if that makes sense. But however, you can always tell from looking at a reel that the person's just into it, and you chat to them, and that's something that I don't know how you encourage that in an education sense. That maybe it's just
I watched Matt Estrella do a talk on Houdini, You're Teaching It Wrong, or I think that was the title of it, at one of the conferences while people could actually communicate in person. And I later talked to him, and we had a bit of a conversation about that, and he was talking about nipping bingo for Houdini show reels. So when they're doing the show reels coming through, there's a set of tutorials by I can't remember his first name, but somebody nipping, and he teaches you all the really clever Houdini effects, but then they appear on all the students' show reels. So when they're doing they were doing them at Animal Logic, doing the reviews, they would just play nipping.
That's exactly the same. Like there's a couple of examples, but there's one that we see all the time, which is some DNEG footage that like test footage that they've given out, and I mean I must have seen that 50 times in the last couple of years, and it's a great demo example when you know the work that's been done on it, but how do you differentiate the 10 graduates who've emailed you and they all have that shot that's to a certain level, and
I think what Matt was saying was it's those that take the nipping and then add their own elements to it and change it up into something that's more more unique for what they do. It is interesting. I have, all three of us, I'm sure, have gone through graduate showcases and showreels, and obviously we have to mark the stuff. And it is a deep sigh sometimes. And today, I like I said, I was saying earlier, I did have a bit of a low day today, but there were a couple of occasions where I had these really, really brilliant, bright sparks of you think there is life out there. And we walked into the green screen room because we heard voices. We were doing our rounds around the corridors at the college, and there was a group of students in there, TV and film students, and they were doing a read-through. So they were all sat round, socially distanced, but doing a read-through of a script and really getting into. And when I say really getting into it, they were creating those laughs and giggles that happen when you've nailed it. You know, when you've nailed the line. And I was with one of the tutors, and I said, guys, are you filming this? And they were like, no, this is just a read-through. I went, please film it, just film it. This is a TikTok gold for going out on social media. This is what a course is about. It's not about sitting at a computer. It's about getting together with your co-students and doing read-throughs, working it out, finding those little gems that are out there, and then figuring out how you're going to shoot it as well. Because they were even doing the shoot. They were doing the actions, and they were so into it. I was so impressed with them. I mean, I do work at a place where certainly our creative department, we're only level 3. We're not into degree level at in the college bit that I do, and we really do work hard on getting that to work on.
And that's a question for you then. So how do you capture and explain to students or explain how they can project that part of their learning to an employer? That it's all well and good that they produce a beautiful reel that looks fine, but I mean, most graduate reels are of just a similar-ish level, which is totally expected and fine, and it's great. But how do you get them to sort of shine outside of their reel? Like, do you guys...
You mean when they're having the conversation?
Yeah, those little side moments where really they're sort of forming their character,
This links back to the last podcast where Matt was talking about this, and I think it's quite clear there are some of us out there that really get the industry calls them soft skills. I call them the hard skills because they're the hardest ones to learn. And these are the skills where it's about standing up for your piece of work and making sure you get across. It doesn't matter if it's wrong, but you just need to explain why you did it, and also then accept the critique. So in the first instance, with certain tutors like myself, we'll tear them down. We'll tear them down in a giggly way. Usually we'll make fun of each other as tutors. We'll tear each other's bits to pieces. I've had that done on a few occasions. We tend to do a summer project for the staff, where the staff will collaborate on a project, and then we'll take it apart, and then they'll take that away into their separated things. We'll do most recently now we're doing Unreal Engine as part of the VFX pipeline. So the staff are as giddy as anything to have Unreal Engine 5. It's absolutely mind blowing. Of course, it means that they've all asked for £3,000 computers for next year, but we'll see where that was. That's not going to be my call. Sorry.
I feel like that's the sort of the hidden cost, not even hidden cost, is it, of Unreal Engine, that everybody likes to shout and say, "Oh, it's free! It's fine. You get mega scans. It's free. It's great." But like we have, correct.
You just need a 3090 graphics card
and a 2 gigabyte standard. A 2 gigabyte SSD to store all the mega scans on.
Absolutely, but you're right, Gary. It's the hardest thing is to contextualize those skills into the academic side. Now we're lucky enough. We've got at the college where I'm working, we're lucky enough to have made. I made the decision a few years ago to move to UAL, University Arts London, which is a very holistic qualification at level 3, very much in line with getting them ready to go on to university. So preparing them for that big step into a much bigger arena where they're no longer the big fish, they're a tiny fish in the big pond. We were able to contextualise that as part of industry, and like I've said before, I've had people like Gary over, and when we walk in, he says, "What can I get away with saying?" And I say, "Well, if you go soft on them, I'm going to be upset." You'd really need to be not the arsehole for being arsehole's sake, but if you see it, say it. Say it. So, so we've been looking that way, but more recently we've been working with Next Gen Skills Academy with the AIM Award, which is Animation, VFX, and Games. And I have to say, Marcia knows this. I was very skeptical at first about what else could they bring. I mean, I've got a big head, you know, and I know a lot of stuff, a lot of people. I can bring a lot of people in, but the thing is, you can't bring them all in. You can't bring them all in the year. And what Next Gen have done is phenomenal in mobilising the industry to provide the resource and the availability. We've done, when we said we, Marcia and her team, Sam in particular. Sam, big respect, mate, if you are listening.
These are people who work at Donny, yeah?
No, these are people that work at Next Gen.
They
have mobilised, and they've done about 50 video podcasts live to students over the course of the year, over the pandemic. They've opened all of those out to the other students that are not on Next Gen courses, and it's just lifted the quality of work and understanding. And students go away with a real appetite. And we got to work with NASA this year on a space project, and you've got somebody beaming in from NASA, talking to your students about how impressed they are with the concepts that they've come up with. Maybe not so much the execution, but the concepts of what they were doing was phenomenal. And that's how we do it. I suppose there are many colleges that don't do it. I won't speak for universities. I don't know enough about them. But, I always took the impression that universities tended to be very slack in the first year and miss an opportunity to give a real upskilling, and tended to try and level everyone up, if you know what I mean. So you get some of the gems that come through and they'd be ready to rock and roll. They're like eager to kick on, and they'd be told, no, we need to bring everybody else up to the same sort of levels. They need to understand 3D. And that to me was a waste. And I've got a big beam about asynchronous learning, but that's another thing. So yeah, that's it. But I'm not sure we're doing it right, Gary. To be honest, I'm not sure we are. But we've interviewed some alumni, Adam, and he made it through the whole system, didn't he? So.
And he made it basically clear that the thing is that even if you are very, very capable of doing it, and if you're very, very capable of actually knowing the software and applying it to all these things, unless you have that final piece of paper, it can essentially all come to nothing. So you can be really, really skilled, but if you haven't got a degree, and you've got to be able to get in there and prove that you've got something. But he said without the paper, it's kind of like you've got nothing, which is a shame, because I disagree with that.
Yeah,
I mean, I feel a lot of that can come from, though, that recruiters and people that, in order to go and find those artists, you're going to start at university. So I don't think it's necessarily that they've got a degree. It's probably just that they're in a place where I can network. Unless I'm all for do it yourself, and I'll happily interview and take reels from people who've trained to be a chef, but in their spare time have been doing visual effects and decided they want to switch. If they've found
You've just described my entire life.
If they found the time and effort in how to reach out to me and email, then I'm not going to judge them for not having a degree. But like I say, I think a lot of it just comes from this networking again.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the new job I'm going to. There was a couple of conversations that we had, and we were talking about why they wanted me to go and work for them. And one of the things that came through was that I'm tenacious, that I don't give up on, not Tenacious D, no. Although I love Tenacious D.
No, stop, carry on. Stop it, you're
okay,
going
so,
off piste.
But the tenacity of a person is part of something that happens in your formative years. And I skipped uni. I am the thick lad in the room. Rubbish. On paper, I'm the thick lad in the room for now until I pass my masters. And I had the school of hard knocks. So I started as a box shifter in a reseller company, and there I am making up these boxes. And then I found out that there were computers in them, and rather than nick them, I got to play with them and use them. And that was me. I couldn't write in Unix, and I learnt Unix. I learnt I learnt the commands in Unix, and then suddenly I found out that actually that was the early parts of pipeline engineering. Where you're building, connectivity within your network to streamline file access, file permissions, where things are, which drives are the fastest drives. Starting to get things like RAID systems put together, and before we knew it, I went down the art route. I took the easy route, I think, in a way, because I went down that route. But the computing route, the science route, that's the route where there's so much money to be had.
Well, Gary, you've gone down the pipelining route. I mean, that's a lot of the time, a lot of the stuff that you do when you're in London was VFX pipeline, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I found myself going into that. I think starting in a smaller company in Manchester, I think I just had a natural affinity towards code and things like that, and self-taught Python. And being, at the time, really the only artist at one point using Nuke in version 5 or whatever it was we started with, how to just add a gizmo into Nuke or something like that. And it kind of grew from there. And I then realised going to first studios in London that not only had at that point it was like 18 months more experience on everybody in Nuke, because bigger companies that have more sort of more robust pipelines that don't just suddenly decide to use Nuke. So at the time I got to London, everybody really was using Shake, and the first facilities were using Nuke, and I'd got a one up on everyone on knowing a bit of Python. And I think it's that thing, tenacity of just having the oh hey, I could probably code this and do that, and just very sort of incrementally ratcheted that up, and it differentiates yourself in the workplace. If you're in the building and you can offer something outside of, in my case, compositing, but also that supports the job I'm doing, people lap it up, employers love it. And that's how it sort of went from there, really. I've never, because I don't have a computer science background or I'm all in developer, I'm never going to get looked at for doing like a full-time pipeline developer role. But as a TD for 2D, I've done loads of work in that, and that's been really good for me, I think. And I think it's also made it quite refreshing for me, because I've been able to just do jobs that are entirely compositing, where I can just put my headphones on and work away. But there've also been other times where for 7 or 8 months all I have is JetBrains open, and away you go. It's great.
Well, I think that segues quite nicely into what's the best project you've ever worked on, and why would you say it is, if you can tell us?
Be it pipeline or TV or film or whatever.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, it could be the actual end result, but also it could just be a part of a job that you did that you just absolutely buzzed on.
Great question. I have no idea. Does anybody enjoy projects in our industry?
Let's call it the reflective. What did you call it, Gary? There are two things that you said when you were running.
Apparently, when Alex, my wife, told me about it, but there's 2 types of fun when it comes to running. There's type 1 fun and there's type 2 fun. Type 1 fun is when you enjoy the run. Type 2 fun is when you hate the run, but at the end of it, you realise actually how good the run was. So it's like a type 1. I've had type 1 jobs, which have been great. Like, I loved working on Young Drac. I loved working on Young Dracula. That was fantastic. Every single moment of it was fabulous. And then I've got type 2 fun, which is a project that I worked on back in London, which looks beautiful, but almost killed one of the people who worked at the company. I mean, he was working silly hours, poor fella, and he was every time he did something and got it up to a stage where it was almost 95% of the way done on the shot, the director would come in and say, right, can you please change this on that one? So rather than let us get the entire project done and then make comments, he was commenting all the time throughout the entire thing. So the end result looked great, but we were basically doing shift work towards the end. And I remember there was one time I came in there into work in the morning. The guy was fast asleep on the sofa, and he'd only had like 2 hours, and I'd gotten there at 9 o'clock. So we'd basically been sitting in the office for like 22 hours. He hadn't gone home, and he'd done that about 3 days in a row. And I just said, right, go home. Just go home. I'll
Did you have
take
that
over.
talk with him, Gary? Did you have that talk with him?
Literally, it was that. I went out and bought him some breakfast and told him to go home. Yeah. And he wouldn't go. Eventually, the boss came in The boss said,
See, Gary did that
"Go
to me
home."
on one night when we were working at 422, and he said, if you don't go home, don't come in the morning because you're sacked. Pretty much.
Yeah, but I didn't say those. It wasn't my place to say the final bit of that.
No, it wasn't, but it was in your eyes.
Fundamentally, it was,
It
you
was
are
in-
no use to me
Yeah.
if you are tired.
Yeah.
Go to bed.
And I'll be honest, Gary, I've used that, as I've said, in so many lectures.
There's
Because
nothing
it's
worse
so
than people being
important.
out of sync with each other. And if everyone's working on a project, and about if you've got 20 people working on a project, and 3 of them are basically working at night, I think you start to get issues because they need to get things done. Anyway, that's me.
It's great. It's a really great story because it's given me time to sit and think about that question.
Gary needs to answer the question.
The wrong Gary answered that question, I think. I wouldn't say it's a project, but I'd say it's. I've worked for Aardman for a couple of projects, and that stands out probably as my most favourite for all the obvious reasons that everybody probably in our generation knows. It's just that. It's just that intangible Aardman thing. Watching Wrong Trousers at Christmas and just loving all of that stop motion thing. A big dream of mine that I'll probably never do now is to work for Leica. That would absolutely blow my mind. And there's been little dalliances with connections that I know there, but it's just never lined up. But yeah, the 2 jobs I worked on Aardman were amazing, and the company was everything you'd imagine it to be. And and I've got a really clear memory of being in their staff canteen and looking around, and Nick Park just being in the queue behind me, just waiting for his jacket
like
potato.
the IKEA queue for meatballs.
Yeah.
What are you
just a
having?
regular
I
Joe.
think I'm having the vegan. All right, okay.
Yeah, a wonderful place to work, and then just Bristol. It's down on the docks there. I don't know if you know where it is and to go to work, I was walking into Bristol, walking along the riverfront, and then taking a little boat that you give a guy £1, and he shuttles 2 or 3 people just across the bay, drops you off just down the entrance from Aardman. Stunning.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And just because I'm feeling a little left out here, and I did fear that on this podcast I did fear a little of that, but I do remember working for a couple of weeks at McKinnon and Saunders and they were doing some big stop motion stuff. I remember trying to teach them Maya. It was fun. It was fun. Do you know what the beauty was? The animators knew what they wanted to do, and all they needed to know was which buttons they needed to press to make it happen. And in my time at that point, when I was doing some of the stuff that I was doing, I'd been dealing with a lot of people who hadn't got that animation eye, hadn't got that eye for detail and composition, and suddenly I found that I was sat there just soaking up so much knowledge from people that were just legends, but people you never saw because they were always behind, moving one frame at a time, with a vision way ahead of everybody else. So, on to the next question. The hardest job you've ever done?
Oh my. Another great question. I wonder if Gary's got a 5-minute story.
Let's not ask him. Let's not ask Mr. Noden, so you can't have a break. Although this technically isn't the quick fire round, so you can actually have a bit of a meander if you want.
Hardest job. It's going to be an awkward pause in your podcast whilst I...
No, we're excellent at editing.
I think of that.
We have just waited 44 minutes now for Gary to answer.
I mean, I'll say, I'm not sure if I can identify a particular one, but I'd say the jobs that I find the most difficult are probably the ones that I don't really connect with. I think there's, in all the jobs that we do, there's challenges to overcome, and I think I think there's a bit of an addiction to that. That's sort of what we enjoy, is problem solving and working ourselves into a little frenzy trying to solve everything. And I feel like that just comes with the territory that you every job has things that are extremely difficult. I don't think there's ever anything that it's just impossible. Because when you reach that point, you're probably chatting, depending on your level, you're chatting with your lead, or you're chatting with your supervisor, or you're chatting with your producer, or you're chatting with the client. That never changes, there's never just impossible. But I think there are just jobs that you just don't want to do, you just your staff somewhere, or even you're a freelancer, you penciled for a freelance job and you turn up and you just think, nah, this spot doesn't look super fun. I'm just not into it. I think they're the ones because you're sort of stuck then for 6 weeks or 3 weeks or a day, just having to sort of endure and work on, a questionable company's commercial.
You are absolutely right, Gary, because since knowing I was going to leave, my job's pretty much gone flat from a personal, a satisfaction point of view. And then a challenge has come along at work, which is we have to spend a large amount of money on new equipment, and there is a silicon shortage currently in the marketplace. Thank you all of you Bitcoin miners and whoever else are out there doing it. And the challenge is on to find the silicon, to find the machine parts and everything else we need. So I'm trying to spend not an insignificant amount of money on quite a few workstations. And I found out the other day that even the big companies like Framestore and those big companies, they've been waiting months and months and months for their stuff to arrive. So yeah, I get what you're saying. When that challenge comes in, when it's like, okay, game on, and I'll go back to that art teacher telling me I'd never make it in art. That was the original challenge, and I think it just ignites something inside you that's like, it's almost like a flame goes off, and then it's how long that flame will burn. I feel like
that's the trajectory of most projects. That if you have too long a time, the first 60% of the time in a project just gets, away. Sorry to swear. Just get, and I think it's because as you get nearer and nearer to the end, you work yourself. The team works themselves into this frenzy, and I mean that repeats itself every time. Like I've never worked on a project where you just sort of sail through it at 60%. It just ramps into chaos every time.
It's so prevalent, especially in the games industry, where they have a budget for the pizzas and the Coke and everything else, where they know that they're going to be going over and people are staying later, and they tell you that. But it is interesting because from a student's perspective, they do suffer the same sort of thing, especially on some of the longer projects, where it seems like it's an age away, and then before they know it, the cliff face is approaching so rapidly, and they find that they've got to. I think that's where the metal's tested, and if that's how and this again to students out there, if that's what you enjoy doing, you probably will have a good run in the industry, because you'll feed off of that adrenaline. It's there all the time, but it's dangerous. It is dangerous.
I think personally that the issue of leaving everything to the last minute is a natural state of being for everyone on every single job, no matter what it is.
I mean, I do find it obviously does really frustrate me, and I've seen some of the darker sides of our industry with hours worked, and I think the film industry isn't even touching what the game industry sort of cultures are, and I'd love to, and I've had my more naive moments in sort of starting to become leads and supervisor, where you think you can sort of change that and try and instill it, but I can't help but feel it's kind of that army mentality where it's like, well, I got bullied when I started. Then I feel like that as you go through the industry, you just become more and more hardened and just kind of accept it, and it becomes harder to fight. And I think that's the message to students in some sense, that I think that there just is a reality of that you have to accept that it just is like that. It doesn't mean that I never ask anybody to stay and work like that. I would never do that. Like, that's not my vibe. However,
no. You just need the job finishing.
That's it. I mean, and it is the sad nature of our industry that that's how it gets done, and it does. I get sad. I find myself at my desk late at night sometimes, and it's just how it is. I know that sounds really. It can be a bit disheartening probably to hear that, but.
Let's ask yourself a question, because this is the next question. What would be the one thing that you would advise a younger version of yourself?
Take yourself back in time to say, either when you're during your degree or maybe when you first started working in the industry, and of all these wonderful things you've done in the last 12 years.
Well, so I mean, what I would do is I'd go back and tell myself that the decisions I made, I'll reflect on them in a second, but the decisions I made are fine. And what I was told, the two big things I was always definitely instilled by my mum growing up was just don't lie. Just if you've done something wrong, admit it and we'll fix it. That's the first thing. It's better to deal with that initial shock and we'll deal with it and fine. And the other thing is, and it's a thing a lot said, but be true to yourself. And I think they're the two things that I have always tried to have in any aspect of my life. If I'm uncomfortable or not enjoying something, I don't mean you're just having a bad day or you're a bit tired. If you just know in your heart something's not right, change it. Follow your gut. And that seems a bit weird, but the further I get into my life, the more I realise actually that I'm happy those decisions worked out really well for me. That instinct, but I also think that it's not. I don't think there's an aspect of luck. I just think that you just make your own life. Like, don't be scared to make decisions and try it. They're all well trodden phrases, aren't they? Things like you'll only regret the things you don't do. But I'm starting to see that more and more now. Of just like, try these little opportunities. If I mean, obviously we're going to talk about work here. So in work, if someone offers you a little opportunity that seems a little bit exciting and different, why not take it? Give it a go. Try it. If it doesn't work, it really doesn't matter. Things tend to work out. You have bumps and things there every now and again, but just give it a go. And I think so. Yeah, if I could go back and tell myself, I'd kind of just reassure myself that it's going to be fine. I'd give myself a little hug and just tell me that it's all going to be fine.
Yeah, and I think our generation. I think we looked up to our parents and our grandparents as being, we've talked about this before, haven't we, Gary? They were the guiding lights for us, and I think there's been a disconnection for some of families in Britain, and probably around the world these days, where you don't see that, and I see it every year for families that don't have that network at home that gives that support that helps those decisions to be made with a bit more confidence. I would say one thing, Gary. My nan used to tell me, always wear clean underwear, because you never know when you're going to get run over.
I've had a similar one of, I never leave my house in a position that if I was to get run over, that someone would have to come to my house and find something,
Yeah. But I mean, I always took that as being quite a literal thing, thinking, I just think I'm going to get run over. And that's really... But it was the analogy of, you need to be at your best because you never know what's going to happen. So it's the live life now, like you're saying, take those little risks where you need to take the risks, and do it with a smile and an enjoyment. We've people that chase paper. I think it's a difficult one because it's the devil, isn't it? You've got to have it. You've got to have the paper. You've got to have the money to live the life. But if you're working to live, or do you live to work? It's get that balance. Well,
definitely. Right. And again, we're probably indoctrinated to this sort of thing in our industry, and it's really the industry I've known for the majority of my career now, for the last sort of 12 years. So I'm sure there are lots of other career choices that are the same, but obviously there's the downsides in our industry of the work hours and general sort of culture behind that. However, being at work and that culture is amazing. Like the people you get to work with, the places you get to go, the films, the projects you get to work on, like sometimes that gets lost amidst all of that, is that like we are at work a lot and we do work a lot, but being there is amazing. You're not just sat at your desks filling in spreadsheets or some anonymous call center work or something like that. Like the culture of just being at work is always amazing. It
is, and I love watching when they do the breakdowns and you see the actual, like where someone's filmed a little bit of the studio activity that's going on. And you when you've been in that situation, you know what those conversations are, and you know what the relationships are with those people, and it just makes you feel warm sometimes when you think about those.
Or damp.
Right, I'm going to move on. Just like that. So I
like this next question.
I know
Gary.
you do.
This is my favourite question.
I'm going to let you ask this one, Gary.
No, all right then. Gary, open source software. Do you use any? And if you do, what do you use it for?
I mean, I'm really happy. How far are we into this project now? Well, we're nearly an hour in here, and we've not talked about Blender, which makes me very happy. I think that might be a record for your podcast. Open source. That is a good question. I mean, I've definitely, Blender's going to come up. I've definitely started using Blender in the last couple of years. My career has been entirely 2D based. Obviously, I studied and had 3D. I have basic modelling, lighting skills in terms of Maya and things like that. No texture, or anything of that sort. No animation or no rigging skills, anything like that.
Well, that's your first year past then anyway.
However, there's always been a general need in terms of 2.5D set extension work, map painting and environment work. I've always been able to sort of chip in every now and again and sneak a Maya license and quickly build up a little something to do some projections on or something like that. And I just noticed a couple of years ago that there was this app called Blender that I'd started seeing and popping up on Instagram and YouTube feeds, and what's this donut that everybody's making?
Instagram.
Yeah.
We like Instagram, Blender.
Everybody's making pillows and cushions all of a sudden. What's going on?
Or nice little isometric
And
areas.
I think it was, and I think I can track it back now to the release of Blender. Is it 2.8? The sort of big UI update. That And I remember sort of opening it, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Part of how I heard of Blender is obviously Gary Noden touting it around the offices when I was freelancing there. Now, part of that made me not trust it. Because the only other apps that Gary would talk about are things like GIMP and what's the other one that you would have used? Critter. There we go. So it was always like, oh, Gary Noden talks about that. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, I'm not going to bother with that. However, Blender 2.8...
Which is weird, Gary. I would just say, which is weird because he was obviously in 3D World magazine touting Maya for so many years. So
but actually, very quickly on that score, there's one particular one that years ago when I was still doing the Maya tutorials for them, there was one cover that came out, and it was one of the releases where they kind of improved a lot of the stuff, like the shading and whatnot. And the whole front cover was this like big blue sort of like troll thing. And it was all done, it was modelled, lit, rendered and everything in Blender. And I'd been, I would always have Blender, open it and close it, and have Blender and open it and close it and delete it and so on. And then I saw this thing on the front cover and I was like, that's actually quite good. And it was after they'd done Elephant's Dream, the short film. And I then started to look at it properly. And again, I still found it really irritating. But then I thought, no, let's just get past this. And that's when I realised how powerful it was.
Well, I'll go back over that story a little more. So I mean, the best analogy to that is it'd be like if Gary and I were professional Formula One drivers, and I'm driving along with Gary, and obviously Gary's using Maya, but he's telling me that he's also using this thing called Blender. Now, I'm not going to take him very seriously. It's like, but yeah, you're a professional Maya user. Why would you recommend this other free thing that you just download off the internet that's open source? Like, I think in the context of a studio where you're seeing the professional use the industry standard app, for him to tell you that there's this little open source thing on the side, I'm not going to take that seriously.
But here's the thing, you see, the first reason why is because of the free word. Because even though, I mean, I know you can get PLEs and you can get indie licenses and stuff, but for a while, if you wanted to use Maya, you had to basically crack it. And I mean, occasionally I would use it not to actually do anything for industry, but for doing things for myself on a version that was not exactly legal. I'm not gonna lie, but I'd never used it for proper work. So when it came to what I was going to use for proper work, I immediately went to Modo and had a license of that for a while, and it was cheaper than Maya by a long stretch. And when I first used it, it was just before it had been bought by the Foundry, and they had a special, I think it was number 8, is that the 7 or Modo 8, Modo 7, anyway, and you could buy it for half the price for a perpetual license. And I was like, I need some software that I can actually use for freelance stuff that I know I can trust. And my brain just went, obviously Maya, but I can't do that, so I'll use Modo. And actually, it was for a long time. I used it for everything.
So that's how I came to it, I guess, in that sense of as a 2D artist in studios, and wanting to sort of again, similar to having a bit of Python knowledge, being like, oh, well, that's fine, because in Nuke there's a script editor and I only need a text editor and I can do what I need to do. 3D is a little different when you're in a studio, that if you want to do some 3D, you're not going to do that in Nuke. So, hey, what can I have a Maya license? Oh, we've only got 5. That's fine. Yeah, just realising, oh, well, hang on, I can just download this Blender thing. Let me take a look at this. And like very quickly realising that it's approachable from my perspective. I'm not a 3D artist, so I can't comment on how like robust its pipeline will be if you were going to try and use it in DMag or NPC. But
so there's a chap that I know called Thomas Butters who works for Face Punch, which is the studio behind Rust, the game. And if you check him out on ArtStation, everything's Blender. He builds it in Blender, he takes it to ZBrush, he then brings back the high-res mesh, he makes the low versions and then bakes them all in. He showed the workflow for a while on Twitch, but then had to stop. And that was the point where I'd just been introduced again by Gary to Blender. After rebutting it for so long, and it was a long time, I was saying, Gary, I can't. I'm a Maya person through and through. If you cut me in half, Blackpool Rock, it says Maya.
And it will be interesting though to see how like studios implement it, because you're not going to take the risk on hiring a Blender artist and trying to integrate that into your 3D pipeline.
Well, we'll jump to the next question in a second. Ooh, yes, but. It's similar, yeah, but you see, I stopped teaching software about 3 years ago. Even though I was teaching Maya, I stopped teaching software. When I teach pipeline of process. So you go through the process, and I would open Max, I would open Maya. I even started opening up Houdini just to show that the buttons were the same, just in different locations, so that the students got that. Took away the fear factor and also this stigmatism that if you didn't use this particular package, you couldn't get into industry, if that makes sense. And all they had to do was get good at understanding shape, at understanding detail, at understanding topology, at understanding a UV wrap, unwrap, at understanding how to pack those up and make a trim sheet.
I feel like though that has to at some point translate to, recruiters in these big companies and things like that they're going to ask for a Maya artist. They're not, okay, yeah, you're going to look at a showreel and you're going to know that person's work is hot. Like, you're going to be like, this person's great, let's talk to them. What did you do this in? Blender. I shouldn't, I'm sorry, the way I phrase Blender is really unfair. I'd say it really like I'm taking the piss out of it.
No. The thing is, that
was a little
Gary,
like I said earlier, which was, you phrased it like...
I don't mean that, but I mean that if I hire a 3D artist and I know my studio use Maya, I want to make sure when they come in on that first day, they're not sniffing around the studio being like, I do know 3D modelling, but I've not used Maya for a couple of years, so how do I click this? But there's also the reverse of that, of it's so hard just to integrate. You can't have a studio that goes, use whichever 3D app you like. We've got Maya and we've got Blender.
Yeah, but we've actually, John and I have actually realised during the course of doing this podcast that in a lot of cases, that obviously, yeah, you're right, it's how you integrate it in, but mostly people tend to use it for roughs, for 3D scamps, and for modelling.
I know, but you might say that it's fine on a little independent, smaller company thing, but in a bigger company,
No. We're not talking the small companies. This is the thing. We're talking. Was it D3T? DT3?
D3T.
I'm not disputing that you can't set up. However, but asking a big facility to integrate Blender into its pipeline is a huge step.
You don't. You're right, Gary. You don't ask them to do that. But what I would say is there's the way that the industry has now started to shape itself, and Pixar were the revolutionaries in this. The universal scene descriptors, the USDs now that you get, that all software has, and Blender's had for quite a while, it allows for you to take the entire art setup that is there and put it into whatever native package is in the studio. So it doesn't really matter what you've done. And FBX has been around for a while. When you're using game engines, it doesn't matter where
it doesn't, but they all
end up in Unreal.
I still feel that runs on somewhat of naive implementation of you just going to file, open, import USD scene. Like a lot of these companies have like back end publishing and file management systems and things like that. I'm not saying that of course Blender's super like friendly with Python and things like that, but the task of integrating that, given how you're asking, you're asking like a Titanic sized pipeline shifts that
it was interesting. We've just done a project in Unity, and I haven't used Unity for ages. Unity, the latest version of Unity came out, and we asked the students to do it in Unity because we needed them to do some C# programming and C++ programming, which you can do it in Unreal, but it's a slightly more advanced way of actually working in Unreal. So we went down the Unity route, much easier for them to get their heads around it. And I was telling them to export it as an FBX. It didn't matter where it was coming from, so we had some exporting Maya objects, some exporting Blender objects.
I know what you're about to say.
I then found out in Unity, all you need to do is go File, Open, Blender file, and it opens it up, and everything comes in. And it was one of those like, oh my god, when did that happen? And it happened because Blender, I think in essentials, Gary, is FBX.
Yeah.
So by its nature of being open source, they looked at their file format and went, what is the most common universal open language we've got? It's FBX, and the Blender file is essentially a zip file.
Pretty much, yes. A .blend is a zip file in the same way that their add-ons are zips as well. But
it's not, and it's not just about file formats. It's like who names those files, like what's tracking. Artists in most facilities with pipelines aren't doing file save as comp version 3.
No.
Save, and telling your friend like that all these things have to be integrated and built in, especially at scale. Smaller companies, I don't doubt that they're more agile. And
I am looking forward to when I think this conversation at BlenderCon probably comes up at the next BlenderCon, because I think since 2.8, and as you'll have noticed since 2.8, there's been some huge leaps, and we're at 2.9.3 LTS now, and version 3 is coming out or begins. Yeah. It's now beginning its pipeline of alpha beta stages. They've integrated a hell of a lot of new tech that is now challenging, wrong word, is now comparable to Houdini with their node systems, and works in the same sort of way. And remember, Nuke did it as well. Nuke's been there. Things catch up, and then suddenly they leap beyond where you're going to be. And I'm not saying that Blender will replace Nuke in any shape or form, but at the lower end, it will certainly be something that you can conceptualize it.
Well, it has to start somewhere, right? So, I mean, I know for sure. I used Blender in a studio on a job last year, doing a little bit of set extension, and my supervisor there was like, "Oh, that's cool. How did you do that?" I was like, "Oh, well, if you didn't mind, I didn't say
Don't
anything."
Say Blender.
Well, no, I didn't. I was like, I didn't want to say anybody, but I just downloaded this app Blender and an FSpy. And,
yes.
I was like, I just built it up. And he's like, oh, is that 3D? Yeah, I don't do 3D, but yeah, I built it up a little bit. And I showed it him, and he opened it. And now I know for sure that they're using it in their studio. And if the supervisor or the lead flame up in this case, and I know that's where maybe their TD will be like, oh, hey, we should probably hook it in, and it will go from there, because it will. If I'm doing it, there'll be a few little people like that sneaking it into facilities, just like I can just do it wholesale.
Absolutely.
I think we're going to have to give you Gary the little Blender secret Superman shirt there for that one, for just seeding it into a little studio.
Well, it's not just it. It's in I worked on a big Hollywood feature last year, and there's 2 shots in there that have Blender in it, in the background.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
So it is. I mean, we know from Corridor Crew, we know from quite a lot that in the stateside, Blender gets used quite a lot, and I think probably because of the speed at which you can do the Previs stuff.
Yes,
and that's how I'm using it. It's just for that, but it's not pipelineable currently. Well,
Okay, so we got that. That was a fantastic answer to the question. Even though
it was.
I know you grimaced all the way through it, Gary. I did notice that, but thank you for being very honest about it. So what's What's
That's his normal face. He doesn't have to pull a face. It's just perfect all the time.
It's when he looked up. I just saw the dread.
It's the eye roll. It's just the eye roll because he's sick of hearing it from me.
But,
So what's more important here is the next question.
Yeah,
John?
what's more important here, skills or software?
Oh, that's a nightmare.
That's to you, Gary.
I mean, they're 50-50, right? They really are. I mean, it's all well and good having some amazing paint techniques if you can't apply them using an app. But then the other way around, that if you're really good at know all of the nodes inside of Nuke, but you don't know how to use any of them.
You can't even put a vignette down properly. Yeah.
Correct. I mean, it's going to be skills though, right? I'd say it's definitely skills, but however, that's
all
not
of these
one...
questions are your opinion, Gary. I mean, we respect everybody that comes on in the sense that Mr. Noden.
Well, maybe.
I respect everybody that comes on. Mr. Noden obviously doesn't respect anybody.
No, skills.
However,
skills are important, but also knowledge of software is unfortunately really key, because when you go and work in facilities and places like that, they're going to have specific apps that they use. That's how it is. Again, going back to our point of just like it's all well and good to dream of these multi-software vendors and places, but
yeah, when I worked at Revolution on Broken Sword 3, I went in there as a Maya artist, and I had some of what I thought were the most challenging levels, because mine were all underground, so they were like there was no sort of like daylight system. I could just pour in and get a really nice result instantly. Everything had to be done like lamplight and things like that.
Oh, I'd have thought it would have been the reverse. I'd have probably loved the darker environment where you've got control of everything. And
they were, and they were, but
Get away
at the
with so much
time,
more.
Maya could only handle 6.5 lights. Yeah.
Oh my God, that whole thing. Yes. Yeah, you can actually turn the number up now. You could never do that before.
So I could only do it in portions. So we did it in LOD sections, and that's the way we got around it. But I ended up using a Lightwave hybrid, botched together. The coders had sort of melded it with the game engine, and then they did some sort of light bake thing, and you had to cook it on your own machine. So that meant that you went away for sort of like 6 hours and came back and prayed that you'd turned everything on that you should have turned on. Remember, you can't actually see everything in the Maya file, so it was a real pain in the arse. Are all those lights actually linked? And no, they all turn on. But I guess when you go into those, I didn't know that software, but what I did know is I knew lighting, and I knew light layers, and I knew all the bits, and I knew what ambient occlusion was, and I knew how to create render passes. So it didn't really matter for me what the software was. I just needed to know which buttons I had to press, and that was a sort of 15-minute tutorial in a handbook the size of the Eiffel Tower. And that's how we went through it. So yeah, skills and software, they're 50-50, and we've said this before. We have said
Yeah, I
this
think
I just
yeah,
picked
you're
up on
absolutely
what
right,
you said there about light baking and LOD, that in a couple of years there's going to be kids using Unreal Engine 6 just wondering like level of detail.
Well,
What is LOD?
It's very interesting you say that, Gary, because for a long time, you did your texturing in Photoshop. And you did it by going, I'm going to do a bit of texturing, I'm going to save it, bring it back. Does that look all right? Oh, it's a bit stretchy. Okay, I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to do a bit more texturing. I'm going to move those bits. And it was like table tennis, and you spent forever. And not only the fact that you had to hand move all the UVs as well. Kids today do not understand that process, because they shift it into they do an automatic unwrap, and then they'll pin the edges. They'll then stabilize the edges and just create them all at offset angles, and then they'll do a texture pack so that the UVs are all packed into a really nice islands, and then they'll send that out to Substance Painter, and then they'll press the auto bake, and then they'll just start adding materials.
Hey, but that's incredible for me, because they get to focus on making beautiful art, and that for me is like I envy them, in a great way, like I don't lament the stuff we had to go through,
But what I'm saying is, it goes back to what you said. Kids, when they're making games in Unreal 6, they won't have what lights had to be baked. What?
it's so inspiring. Like I'm honestly excited to see how these things develop and like what we're going to be able to do. It's just wonderful.
I mean, before we go into the quickfire round, I mean, I'm quite interested on this one. Have you used a light wall yet?
No,
Or
not yet. No, we and I think that's probably representative of most people in our industry. That there are for sure a little group of people in little pockets around the world. ILM obviously being an easy one, but everybody else is playing catch up. You know.
So education. If you're out there and you get a chance to get some money behind a light wall, invest in it now because it's going to be the future.
One thing that did come up though, so we definitely have, and I know I've got jobs coming up this year even that are going to be shooting on volume, light wall, virtual production. No, see, it's so new, no one's even got a name for it. We've been talking about this a lot, and my head of VFX rightfully pointed out that most productions that people work on can't get themselves together to put a graphic on a phone screen. So why on earth are people naive enough to think that they're going to get it together that they can build a whole planet and put it on a 60-foot screen behind them? And I've had this conversation with a friend since who called me up asking for some help on this, and it was the same thing, that it's like, you can't currently, the level of knowledge in our industry is so low that putting together what should be a very simple, what sounds simple, it's fine. You just get a car, you put some volume up behind it, you've got your car shot. No. It's really not that straightforward yet. There are pioneers in our industry who are walking this path now.
I'm going to give a little name check to Oliver Reeve, who's my course leader for film and TV at Doncaster College. He's got his own channel out there, and if you get a chance to have a look at it, it's quite good. He does a lot of his own work and stuff, and he's into green screen and all sorts of stuff. And he's we have a really nice Z4 workstation available for him over the summer that they can work with this year, and they're dropping Unreal 5 on it. And he was getting really giddy. He wanted to get the Blackmagic 4K cameras to link up and do some real time green screen removal with the Unreal Engine. And I was so excited for him. And I said, "What are you using to motion track your cameras?" And he sort of went, "No, we're going to keep by hand. It's going to be a great little exercise." I went, "Really? Okay." I would look forward to seeing those results and throwing up. Yeah. So there's little bits of. I sort of said to him, "Look, if I get you a Vive, and we get the trackers for the Vive, you just need to work out how to make that work in Unreal Engine so it tags to your camera."
And again, all these conversations are brilliant to have when you're not on the clock. But we're here we're making money. And these things cost. You can't just rock up to a set with a camera and some tracking markers and be like, "I need to put them on top of the studio ceiling, and I'm going to need a day to calibrate this camera." Like it's completely new.
And that's what I'm saying, because it's so new. I'm excited for him, but I really need him to understand the magnitude of what they're actually wanting to achieve. Moving it forward, because I said, "Look, just wait for the light wall."
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's how it's going to develop, as that studios, and there'll be places where you go and use a volume, and it's pre-calibrated with. I've already chatted with one studio that we know in Manchester that it's exactly that. They have their cameras, they have all of their lens kits that. Are pre-calibrated with their star tracker or whatever it's called, and we just turn up with a hard drive and they have the hardware and plug it in, and they have the TDs there. Now I feel like that's a glimpse into how it's going to go, but it's the same problem of, can I take the crew to another studio? If there's a crew somewhere else in the country but they need to travel, is that the cost of taking the crew? I don't know.
Well, I was just going to say, when motion capture came out in the first instance, the same sort of things existed then. You had specific places where it was all set up, ready to go, and then there we were. Okay, we're going to jump into quick fire round, because I can see it is getting on a bit. It's always getting on a bit with these podcasts. We have so much fun.
Do have a habit of rambling, hence the reason why Zoom is no good at 40 minutes.
Thanks, Zoom. Google, you've done us proud today. So. Quick fire round. Favourite film of all time, Gary?
I'm going to say Back to the Future, the first one.
Great. Nice.
Why?
I love it.
I mean, I can expand on that a little bit more.
Yes, please.
I mean, obviously, it's a very popular film, isn't it? Like, people love it, but it is but it's also a perfect film. But I feel like there's nothing I can add to that. That everybody. It's the same with saying I've worked at Aardman. People get it, right? Yeah. People.
I love.
If it's not that, it's Muppets Christmas Carol. They will be, but that's a seasonal thing. So, but yeah, Back to the Future. But everybody knows why.
Cool. Favorite VFX shot of all time.
VFX shot.
I'm
not sure about a shot, but I'm going to say the first Harry Potter film. Now, not because I think the visual effects are killer in it, because they've aged not very well, but I think that film came out at a sort of formative time for me in sort of end of first year of uni. And that was like, it was like, okay, don't get me wrong, I saw Jurassic Park and Jumanji. They were all like formative VFX films for, I think, people of my generation. But I was at uni when Harry Potter came out, and it felt within reach. That the making ofs and interviews where they were at studios in London, and I knew where that studio was, and I know that company. I could work there. It's not the problem with Jurassic Park and Twister and all these other Dante's in Peak, or whatever it's called. Like, they were all in LA. Like, they were in this magical other place that you never get to go to. But Harry Potter was made in Britain, and I think those shots and that film stuck with me. And I always wanted to work on them because it felt available,
Yeah,
so,
sure.
Favorite YouTube channel?
I'd probably say at the moment it's Computer File is my favourite. I was actually on a little web seminar of theirs, a webinar with Mike Pound talking about how to crack the Enigma. Just before I literally quit it just before the end to join your podcast.
All right.
So yeah, Computer File.
Cool
have you guys heard of that?
No.
We will.
Have you heard of Number File?
I think you have mentioned it actually to me, Gary.
So Computer File is a YouTube channel run by University of Nottinghamshire. It's their computer science department.
Oh, wow.
And they go around the computer science departments and they just talk about everything related to computer science. There's one chap who's a particularly popular guy called Mike Pound, who's a lecturer there in cryptography, and he talks about AES keys and ciphers, and but he's amazing, and you can watch them. They're 15 minutes at breakfast. There's also some older chaps talking about other things, but anyway, if you're into any sort of computer science broken down by lecturers, that's the genre.
Look at that one.
I've recently found myself watching Daily Driven Exotics, which is a group of guys who own lots and lots of really flash cars from Canada, and they drive them around. But the reason I've started watching it and getting hooked on it is the quality of the productions. And that's the thing. It's almost like you're watching a TV series, but it's YouTube.
So, well, I think Gary and I have talked about this before, that I wonder how, look where we were 10 years ago, look where we were 10 years before that. Like, look at the quality of the content that's on YouTube now. Like, not just, okay, and it's not for me, it's not for my generation. I don't, I look at it and don't understand it, but that's okay because it's not for us, right? There's obviously a generation of kids who are eating that stuff up, and that's their BBC One, that's their Sky.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to grow up to our age and then beyond that. And I wonder, is there a point where the sort of work we're doing in film and television, that gets dissolved even more because younger kids have a different type of content that they want to consume? And are we part of a sort of last generation of like film and high-end TV drama? We're obviously in a golden period for that with the growth of Netflix and Amazon, but there's also this other behemoth growing, which is YouTube, where the content is very self-made and creator-led, and that's only going to grow as these people get into workplaces. And
I mean, obviously we think of them as being on as mobile devices, as that's where we take it in. I don't watch my stuff on YouTube on my device anymore. I watch it on the 4K telly.
Yeah.
So and that's normalising it as an older person to being a channel. And I set my playlists up, and obviously I've got all my Blender ones, and they're great on 4K. It's great watching. Do you know, listening to Gary when he does his Blender videos? I can sit there and I can binge them. It's really nice.
Well, I've gotten better. They're not as long as they used to be.
They are better. But yeah, so that's that. But I get what you're saying, Gary. There is this. I think the speed at which YouTube turn around their productions as well. And I'm not talking about YouTube, the company. I'm talking about YouTubers, the independent. Essentially, they are independent artists now that have their own media channels.
Well, we talk about, you know, you guys call yourself grafters. I mean, like, we all know in our industry how much work it is. I mean, if someone came to me and said, I want to produce 10 minutes of content, what's your budget? I mean, these kids are knocking this stuff out daily.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, chapeau. And it's only going to improve, you know.
It is,
Yes.
and the thing is, the thing is, I've got a good friend who's running the Wimpy channel, the Wimpy Brothers channel. Gary, you need to watch it. But the thing is, he's an independent just starting out, and he's already passed his 1,000. I think he's at 3,500 now, so he's really started to turn it around.
Blimey.
However,
What tags is he using?
it's not tags. I've realised, and he'll talk about it. It's the amount of content you keep producing and dropping out, because it's what you're wanting is the new clicks onto your channel, and the more you can turn through, and this is why people like Linus Tech Tips, LTT.com, they're no longer mending computers. They're just creating content about computers.
Yeah.
And that's what people are consuming. And if you've got 1 million subscribers and 1 million viewers, you're turning over quite a hefty budget, a month to run a studio. So it's an interesting concept.
Corridor crew.
I mean, I do wonder, like, how healthy that sort of environment is. I mean, there's obviously a lot of stories in terms of, like, burnout and things like that you've got to feed that machine. It's not, you can't spend... And again, it might be a naive thing because it's so young, but you can't spend 9 months and just produce a 5-minute YouTube video, you know, like, it's an almost daily thing for the people at the top end. You look at big channels, Mr. Beast, Dude KSI, Perfect, you know, they're all the sort of dad big channels, you know, I'm sure kids have other ones, but I mean, how they are producing that, I mean, obviously I know they have teams behind them, but it's that as a daily thing. I mean, we work hard in our industry, but I don't know if I could keep that pace. I mean,
well, we couldn't because you know we've been acclimatized to the pace and to the workflows that we've got. But I think this is what I was saying at the very beginning. Have the workflows become so tight now?
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. You know, we've trailblazed it all. We've done the hard work. Yeah. We've killed ourselves to do it, and we've refined it down now to a point where you can create YouTube content in every week.
And that's something I like about YouTube. That at least, you know, it's not 150 dudes working in an anonymous studio in Montreal producing this stuff. Like, at least it's led by, you know, if the creator wants to stay up all night producing his YouTube video, that's up to him, you know, like, he's not got a boss in that sense. So that's something that I really enjoy about that, you know, that, like, that if they want to work really hard, it's on them. They're not working for somebody, you know. I think.
So moving on then, work with music or on or off?
On. If I'm working, if I need to grind, music's going on.
What sort of stuff?
It swings wildly. It can be anything from, you know, maybe some classical music, soundtracks occasionally, although I find them a bit too emotive. They take you too many places, you know.
Yeah. I like it.
Rock music, a lot of electronic music. Again, Spotify, what an amazing thing, you know. It just serves me music all day.
It's great.
It's ridiculous.
I'm a Deezer subscriber, so we're leveling it out there a little bit. But there's also Apple Music out there.
Pandora.
So Unreal or Unity? I suppose
Unreal.
That's a weird one.
It's not a weird one for me. It's Unreal. I mean, that's the one that's got visibility from my point of view in our industry. I don't hear anybody talking about Unity. I mean, it's dead in the water in terms of my perspective on it. You know.
Yeah. Are you listening Unity, because you do claim to be VFX friendly?
Hey, I don't doubt the tools. I mean, I've read up and I've seen it, and I've used a little bit of Unity a few years ago, but it's just not in the conversations that I'm having. Everyone says Unreal. I don't know what they do to challenge that. I don't doubt the tools. Maybe a similar thing with Blender, you know, like, I'm sure the tools will work, but no one's talking about it.
You know the virtual set they use for Question of Sport, for Match of the Day?
Yes.
Yeah, that's, you know, I remember I was working at Doc10 when they were doing the initial tests to get it so that actually, you know, you get the motion data from the camera, so once it's calibrated, and then it just moves around the set, and then there's a natural feed. That's Unity. That's
amazing.
not unreal.
Yeah, I don't
Exactly,
doubt it.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. Yeah.
So, substance or Quixel mixer?
Substance painter, yeah. Although Quixel, I think, is gaining some traction, but Substance painter will sort of round off now. Adobe's in charge. Maybe they'll not sort of push the.
That's what worries me.
Some big announcements coming apparently.
Is there?
There was, yeah. It's the it's not, is it E3 at the moment, or which one was on at the moment?
I'm not sure.
Moving on, Adobe or Resolve?
Adobe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm assuming you're talking about the overall brand rather than just Premiere Resolve, right? Or, yeah. I mean, After Effects, Photoshop, they're all still legit apps that are in use, and
I guess never even heard of that. Basically, an online version of Photoshop.
I read a
exactly
press release about that or something. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to get used.
It is getting used.
Yes.
But again, I think you're right. It's by smaller companies and universities.
Of course, yeah. Maya, definitely. But don't get me wrong, Blender is the cool hipster upstart here, and I think in a few years we'll do it, but you know what, right now we've got work to do, and so Maya.
Yes, true.
Cool. What's your best working lunch that you've had, Gary?
Best ever, or just preferred?
Best ever. Or the one that when you're working, you sort of go, right, there's only one thing that can save me now.
Oh, I mean, that's got to be either Bone Daddies or tonkotsu in Soho. So ramen.
Ramen.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Wagamama's.
Yeah, it's a similar thing, you know. It's just something nice.
See, Gary didn't get out, but I loved it when I went to 422. Wagamama's was on the menu, and I was like, yay! That's why I was staying late.
I adore Wagamama's, and it's a regular lunch for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Look forward to sharing one when we can, Gary. That'll be an awesome day out. Tea or coffee, Gary?
Coffee. Decaf now, though. I dropped the caffeine in the last 18 months.
Have you moved to pods?
No,
pods?
I still have an espresso maker, but I switched to decaf beans now.
Yeah, cool. Because I've moved to the pods because I just didn't have time to do the beans and everything. Although I love.
You're okay with the sort of the recycling aspect of pods?
Yeah, I am trying to get mine off Amazon where they are as recyclable as possible. Yeah, you just have to spend a little bit more.
That's fine. You know, and that's what I love about coffee. It's the same with tea. Postcard Teas in London, if anyone wants a great tea shop. That's the great thing about coffee, especially in our industry, that it's like a cigarette break. You know, you can go out and you can find a nice coffee shop or make some coffee in the kitchen, just take 5 minutes and enjoy it and get a nice little routine.
In Doncaster, we had a very big planning meeting. I was part of the planning meeting for the redevelopment of the town centre, and one of the things I was talking about was coffee shops, you know, and not just the brands. I mean, letting the coffee shop, you know, baristas loose. And it sounds, this was pre-COVID, but fingers crossed, Donny, keep going, make it green. We want to do it.
I mean, sort of going back to things we were talking about of like people getting to the industry and things like that. That those little moments, like going to a coffee shop when you're starting working in a facility, is so important, because they're the little moments you can go with the mid-level compers or the senior compers and the next level up, and there's a great scene.
Buy him a brew.
Yeah, or just overhear the conversations. Like they're the little ways to sort of. They're not sneaky by any stretch, but they're the moments to take advantage of. You know.
Absolutely. Last question then, and the most important question.
Absolutely.
Custard creams or bourbons?
Oh, custard creams. There's no doubt.
Absolutely. 100%.
We're going to Gary, we're going to have to start keeping score on this one.
I mean, both are horrible, right? I don't enjoy either, really. They're quite dry. But
with the right brew, they're fine. I mean, for me, a bourbon with an espresso, perfect.
Yeah, maybe. But custard cream wins hands down as a biscuit, full stop.
With a cup of tea.
No.
Yeah, well, I found bourbons too dry.
100%.
For me, we've got to have hobnobs in there if we talk about proper biscuits.
No. We're not muddying the waters any more than we already do.
Well, so I'll put this to you then. Yeah, I've handed you both a chocolate hobnob. Now, which way up are you eating the hobnob? Are you going chocolate tongue side down or chocolate up?
God, that is a good question.
No, I know my answer. I'm going to wait till John says it.
Yeah, I would definitely go chocolate to the nostrils.
Really?
Yep.
Horrendous.
Every single time, chocolate on the top.
Chocolate up?
But I will only eat it if I can dip it in a cup of tea first.
So I believe that chocolate up is considered upside down by the maker of hobnob. Yeah. Maybe it is.
Maybe I'm a borderline Australian. I don't know.
Who knows?
Who
Well, that has been
cares?
absolutely fantastic, Gary, speaking to you. It's been brilliant meeting you tonight. I've absolutely loved it. I've learnt a lot of stuff as well, which is always great.
I feel like we could have talked all night. Maybe we'll have to do this.
I'm just conscious that Gary's got a 2-hour edit to do.
1 hour and 48 minutes I've got here, but I think the first 15 were pre-clap, as it were.
Yeah.
As it were.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I do really appreciate it. It was nice to chat.
Honestly, thank you so much for doing this, Gary. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I really do thank you for doing this. And if you could have a chat to David and just say, David, I really enjoyed that. It was really good fun.
Well, hopefully he'll hear this episode and he'll hear our pleas. I think he'd have a lot to offer this podcast. I genuinely mean that.
David, I haven't met you, and I really would like to have a chat. It's really, really great to meet people from industry.
I've told him it's not a video podcast.
No, even though we are on video looking at each other and we're in our virtual studio.
It's only so I can give John the tells that say, get a move on.
Yeah, I've only just read the ones that popped up.
Seriously.
Messenger. I have to mute mine, otherwise it distracts me. You know what I'm like, Gary.
I do.
I am literally the dog out of Up. Squirrel.
Actually, here's a quick question, and then I'll let this go. But of all the Pixar films that you have seen, which do you believe is the best? Because this is always a bone of contention for me. Because a lot of people say the one that I think is probably one of the worst.
Oh, Inside Out. I mean, for me.
I was just going to say Inside Out.
In terms of best story, I mean that's the one that like really got hold of me.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Soul?
Another, I'd have probably said that second or third. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
It was beautiful. I love Soul.
I mean, it's almost like through the pandemic we've been able to reconnect with some of the. I mean, we've all binged out every Amazon, Netflix, and whatever else you've
Disney
got.
Plus, best
Disney
thing
Plus
ever.
Has been brilliant. Yeah, Disney Plus has been brilliant.
Inside Out was one of those films that obviously, because like I don't think they really went for it to look sort of anything special. I feel like I remember reading one of the Pixar founders' books, and he talks about a film they wanted to make where they sort of relax the schedule a little bit and try not burn everybody out. And I might be wrong, but I understand that film was Inside Out.
Oh wow!
And
really?
yeah, I think they sort of wanted to just take, not in a bad way, but take the bar down on trying to, ratchet it up. But the concepts and ideas that they introduced in there were mind blowing to me. It was like somebody explained. Well, that's what the whole film is. They're explaining how your head works. But I mean, I'd never heard it put like that before. And then they're still concepts that like they live with me now. It's rare in any art form really to really come across pieces like that, let alone a big Hollywood film,
Oh, I know. It really discusses mental health to a finite point, really, doesn't it?
But I mean, obviously, Up will always have a very special place for me because at the time my son was quite young when that came out, and they were the films that we went to the pictures to see. And I always remember the pictures, the Pixar releases were the ones that we always used to go along to and get him on his booster seat, and then I'd have to run to the toilet 3 times with him. All that. You always miss the best bits. The fact that Pixar allow the up and comings in the studios to have that first 10 minutes as well before the feature.
Yeah.
So you get that preview of
And for them, it's also a showcase of their render software because there's always something to do with what they've got. Whether it's volumetric clouds or something, it's all to do.
I
with...
love render.
So do I. But I mean, it's a great big thing.
Indulgence.
Yeah. So for me, my favourite Pixar film, and I do watch it probably about a couple of times every single year without fail, is The Incredibles, the first one. I think it's probably the best at that particular point. It was the best written story they had.
Now you mention it, Gary, you do strike a
I look
resemblance.
nothing like the mother.
Oh, dear. I was going to say the young lad with the flick of the hair.
Really?
But there we go. It's only because I'm jealous and I'm follically challenged on the top.
Anyway, listen, honestly, thank you, Gary, so much for this.
It's been great. Thank you. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
We don't have to record it either.
Very
We can
quickly
just
as well.
talk.
Just before you do go, you mentioned something to me earlier on this week about a certain piece of open source software. Can you remind me what it was that you said?
Was this about
It
the
was to
use
do
of
with the
Blender
university.
in universities?
Yeah.
So yeah, we've been having conversations with a few universities, and obviously the conversation of software came up. Like, what sort of skill set are you looking for? And obviously Maya and things like that came up. And the lecturer, course leader on that, was very wanted to remind us that they're actually dropping Maya from their syllabus sort of incrementally over the last couple of years and moving almost entirely to Blender and Houdini now, which was absolutely news to me.
Yeah.
Because obviously we were like, so you're going to turn a lot of graduates over to us that only know Blender and Houdini now. But, I mean, amazing for people who love Blender, I guess.
I think well, I've done the same thing, and I did it at Donny last year. So and I took the staff down that very painful path. But yeah, I think it's fantastic, and kudos to staffs for doing that. And I'm trying to think of who the course leader is that would have had the stones to put that one in. I've got a few ideas.
I mean, because a lot of that is going to be driven, if the industry suddenly finds that the majority of graduates seem to have a particularly good knowledge of Blender and Houdini, that they're going to have to get their act together, and maybe the money they have to spend on getting a Houdini license will mean that they probably have to use Blender because they can't afford to use Houdini and Maya. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I've certainly not seen any pull for it from my side of the fence, so to see that...
I think potentially it could be more in the game side.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say Blue Zoo Animation are very hot on the use of Houdini, Blender.
Yeah. Yeah, they're very, for their long form stuff now, they're really starting to shift that way. But again, it's...
yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's other industries that are embracing that.
Anyway.
But that's fantastic. So, signing off then, Gary.
Yes.
I suppose
yes.
Good. And Noden.
Yes. So, thank you again, Gary. Really appreciate it, as we've
Thanks
said.
so much.
And that's our kind of a lot for tonight, I think, is it not?
That's a wrap.
Are we done?
It's a wrap. I'll
We're
click
done.
stop on the recording.
Well, you can, but can you say goodbye first, Gary?
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Goodbye, John. It's a good night from you.
It's good night from me.
Good night.
Good night.
See you later.
Everything about you. Everything about you.
This work is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 international license. Any opinions stated during the course of this podcast belong purely to myself and to John, and are based at the time that we record this. The theme music is My Everything by DJ Quads. If you like that, and I'm sure you probably did, there is a lot more of his great stuff which you can find at soundcloud.com/DJ Quads, or his music is also promoted by www.free-stock-music.com.